Calvin Castine back at the Clinton County Historical Association Museum, and we're here on this April 24th, 2025. We're here a couple of days ago for a presentation on railroads, and tonight we're here with Kristina Parker, who grew up in the maple syrup business with her family maple farm in West Shazy area, and she is now town of Altona historian, and she's going to make a presentation here on maple sugaring in Clinton County. And looks like Helen Nerska is ready to introduce her, so we won't hold Helen up.
2 minutes.
In 2 minutes.
We start right on time here. I'm really pleased that Kristina Parker agreed to do her presentation here. This happens to be the second time, but it's very important we feel that she does this here, and thank you very much for coming back. And so Kristina is the town historian for Altona, and I first met her when at the Battle of Plattsburgh Museum, and she was the manager over there and kept them in shape. Many years ago, yes. But I'll turn it over to Kristina now, because she'll tell you about the other things she wants you to know about herself. So, and I'll turn off the lights.
I am currently a member of the New York State Maple Producers Association, and I'm also, people that don't know me from my history background probably know me from working the counter at Parker's. I am a fourth generation of Parker family maple farm in West Shazy. So my brother is in charge of the sugar house, the modern operation. I, as the family historian, kind of do the history of maple syrup. That's always been my my forte. So usually when I talk, I'm talking to a bunch of little kids, school groups, and we do tree to table. So when Helen asked me to do this, I said, I can speak to adults. I can do a little different than tree to table and get more into the history of maple in Clinton County. So tonight, we are going to look at from the Native Americans to the present, but we are going to explore the cultural and politics of maple syrup, and there is a little bit of politics with maple syrup, and how the season was and still is celebrated through text, images, and music, both in the past and today. You all got packets, I think, on your chairs, and we'll refer to those because I am not a great orator, but there was a few articles and examples that I just thought we should all look at together. I will read them, but you can certainly read along, and if everybody's good, I brought maple candy. So if you don't like the presentation, stay to the end anyway, you'll get a prize. I always like to start by polling my crowd. Who here has made maple syrup before? I know you have. You have a CDL hat on. Okay, so rather than focus on production, let's dive right into the celebration of the season. And it's a little bit different than other types of agriculture, I think. So there's always a unique maple vocabulary. My favorite word when talking about maple is the sugar bush. And I'm sure I'm talking to a room full of people that simply know what a sugar bush is, but I always refer back to 1998 and the ice storm. And my dad, Earl, was in a local restaurant, and we had all the crews coming up trying to turn our power back on, and we're all worried about the sugar bush. And this crew comes up to my dad, and they said, look, you have maple apparel on, so you must be a maple producer. He said, yes. He said, well, we've looked everywhere, and everybody's all upset about these sugar bushes. We can't find them. We're looking everywhere, they don't exist. I said, oh yeah, it's a grove of trees with a high concentration of maple. Sometimes referred to as maple orchard, but I've never seen one planted as you have an apple orchard planted. And in researching for my presentation, I often found them called sugar woods. So sugaring season is the time that the maple sap is flowing. People generally understand that it's the spring, but it can be roughly January to April when the weather is correct. You have to have the freezing nights thawing during the day that causes the sap to rise in the tree, and we catch it. In spring, the gathering happens in the sugar bush, and the sap is processed and boiled down into maple syrup, but we're going to talk more about maple sugar, the earlier use of maple sap. This boiling down process is done in the sugar camp or sugar house. That is something that's set up in the sugar bush for the ease of transportation of the sap. As time passed, producers would make a more permanent sugar house. And if we drive around the North Country today, you'll see those dotted either on the roadside or actually in the sugar bush itself. And you can look for the signature cupola. Usually if you're wondering if it's a sugar house or just a house back in the woods, look for that cupola. I have an example here right over my shoulder of my grandfather's sugar house. Maple sugar is going to be our focus tonight because before the advent of canning, goods and refrigeration, sap was often boiled down to its most concentrated form of maple sugar. Kind of skipping over the maple syrup because they didn't have a lot of ways to keep it quite as well. So commonly made into small bricks that could be stored for longer periods. On the side I have let me see if I can find it. Sugar mold that belonged to the family of Charles Ducharme. And there are many other decorative molds as well, but I found that one in a garage of a house I bought, and it's a neat example of an industrial mold. As I said, maple syrup is today's focus, and the maple sugar bricks have all but disappeared. Most producers and consumers today focus on maple syrup as the end product. When I was a kid, I remember all the older customers would come in and they say, I want a brick of sugar, I want maple sugar. So we'd say, oh, we have maple candy. It's not the same thing at all. The evaporator is a term that's unique to maple sugar production. It's the main device that's inside the sugar house where the sap is actually boiled into maple syrup. And we're going to take a closer look at an evaporator shortly. And my favorite part to talk about tonight is the sugar socials or sugaring off parties. Who has been to one? Helen, you go to the ones in Canada, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's where I need to go. I need to check one of those out. They were very popular in the 1800s and early 1900s. People would have sugar socials, remembering that this is a time when you couldn't just travel quickly from Washington to Plattsburgh. So spring was a time to celebrate and get together and really have a little party centered on maple. We'll talk about those sugar socials and sugaring off parties shortly. And a sweet delight of the season is sugar on snow or wax on snow, where the maple syrup is drizzled over snow, and we can talk about that in more detail. Ending my vocabulary lesson. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the first sugar makers. Native Americans were the first maple sugar makers. There are a variety of legends of how the sweet maple sap was first discovered. So I'm not going to touch on that tonight, but there are some interesting legends out there if you want to look it up on your own. Let's take a look actually at the early process. I have pictured here Native Americans' first gathering. Would have done it with hot rocks from a fire, putting the rocks into the trough and rotating them out. I have no idea how long that would have taken, but it must have been an amazing process. The second image I have here is the native sugar camp, and you can see this would have been a little bit later because they have metal, you see the introduction of the metal buckets, where you have the fire with the kettles. So you go from one kettle to the next, and there would have been others as the process moved along. And that must have been a game changer for the time it took to actually boil sap. I don't know if everybody can see I feel like I'm standing in front of the screen, like in the way. But if you look at these trees we have examples of, here, When we tap the trees today, we simply bore a hole into the tree. It doesn't hurt the tree, it heals over before the next season, and we can re-tap in a different area. This would have been the early way to cut into a tree, and here we have some pre-industrialization. They would have either used the one kettle system, as seen here, or made it a community event, depending on how many taps they were working with. You can see the horse-drawn gathering tank in the background, the family all working together, the women, the children, and again, an example of the 3-kettle system in the sugar bush. I told you there's going to be a little bit of politics with maple syrup. So I discovered something called the maple sugar bubble. It was a very short period in the U.S. history, very unique period. Beginning about the 1790s, several prominent U.S. leaders, including Thomas Jefferson, Dr. Benjamin Rush, and William Cooper of Cooperstown, wanted to see maple sugar used to meet the world's demand for sugar. Why is that? First, maple sugar was a native sugar made here in the Northeast, so it could be used to undercut the British plantations and the other areas in the Caribbean, supplanting the need for white sugar. Second of all, so that idea would support nationalism, but second of all, it was the sugar not made by slaves. So you have Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Rush as abolitionists. Dr. Benjamin Rush was working toward having it meet the world's demand for sugar. Do you think that works out? Not at all. We would never think about white sugar competing with maple sugar today, because we understand something they didn't back then. Thomas Jefferson planted a maple orchard. It doesn't work because why?
It's too warm in Virginia.
They don't have the right weather. There is a county in North Carolina, I think, that makes syrup today. They're actually high enough in the mountains. They can achieve it, but where their plantations were located, it wouldn't have been possible. They don't have the right spring conditions. And the other thing is, how do you get maple from the Adirondacks, from the Green Mountains, from New Hampshire, out to the rest of Europe? It's too hard to transport. So the maple sugar bubble popped. But I decided to take a look and see, did that affect Clinton County? Did anybody in Clinton County even notice? And what I came up with, it's in your packet on the first page, and you can feel free to read that. But I highlighted in yellow parts of this poem that I found, published in 1843 in the Plattsburgh newspapers, that talks about I found it to be kind of a love poem about somebody giving maple sugar to your sweetheart, and the maple sugar is Columbia sugar, native to our area, and it's not made by slavery's ills. So it certainly was something that people in Clinton County were thinking about. Along the lines of little odd things where maple sugar would pop up, I continued to search the local papers, and I came up with this interesting little tidbit. You can let me know if you want to try this recipe. It's supposed to be with the 1830s cholera epidemic that swept our region. This doctor came up with a treatment. 2 spoonfuls of charcoal, 2 spoonfuls of hog's lard, 2 spoonfuls of maple sugar.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would have helped cholera, but maybe the maple sugar made it taste amazing. I don't know.
Charcoal, it would have come right in that cup.
And maybe the maple sugar is how you get it down, and the rest of it comes back up. I don't know. But anyway, just a little oddity of how maple sugar pops up when you search it. this point, we've seen several images of early sugaring. The family coming together in the sugar bush. And let's take a moment to look at the early process of making maple syrup as published in March 1821 in the Plattsburgh Republican. The article here was really quite extensive, and I found it quite interesting, but I didn't want to include the whole thing on the screen. So I took some excerpts. This piece was intended as a how-to to make maple sugar in 1821. And you can let me know what you think of this process. 1, scald your buckets for catching sap. 2, the sap should be kept clean from dirt through the process of boiling. 3, avoid leaving the sap long in an iron kettle as the rust will give it a darker color. 4, when it is nearly boiled down to syrup or thin molasses, a little lime thrown in the kettle will be of some use. I don't know what we're using lime for, but maybe it was to do with rust at the kettle. The article actually went on to talk about how you can make lighter maple sugar by adding milk, which I found very funny because today we focus on pure maple syrup and pure maple sugar. So I don't know why you're adding milk, but I wish the article would have continued and said a little lime thrown in the kettle would be of some use because. I wanted the sentence to continue. I promised that we were going to look at, I hope Helen turned up the volume on the computer, I didn't check, but I promised that we take a look at images, text, and music for the culture of maple sugaring. It was certainly an anticipated time and a celebrated agricultural season throughout the U.S. and Canada, and traveling around Clinton County today with watchful eye. Like I said, you'll see a number of derelict sugar houses. The one pictured here belongs to the Relation family. It's located on the Vassar Road in Altona. So imagine that sugar house full of busy work and family laughter as we take a moment to listen to the Maple Sugar Song, written in 1858 by Reverend Perrin Fisk. No relation to Fisk Road, because I tried to make the connection. That would have been just really cool. And he was from Vermont, and you can almost hear the hymnal, maybe, kind of sound to it. Let's see.
Oh, bubble, bubble, bubble goes the syrup in the pan. Making sweeter music, try to top it if you can. See the golden bellows, watch the ebb and flow. Sweeter joys indeed, we sugar makers know. When you see the vapor pillar link the forest to the sky, you may know the days of sugar making then are drawing nigh. Frosty nights and sunny days make the maple pulses play, till congested with its sweetness it delights to bleed away. Oh, bubble, bubble, bubble goes the syrup in the pan. Making sweeter music, try to top it if you can. See the golden bellows, watch the ebb and flow. Sweeter joys indeed, we sugar makers know. When you see the farmer trudging with his dripping buckets home, you mean all the days of sugar making then have fully come. When the fragrant odors pour through the open door, and the eager children rally ever loudly crying, oh, bubble, bubble, bubble goes the syrup in the pan. Making sweeter music, try to top it if you can. See the golden billows, watch the ebb and flow. Sweeter joys indeed, we sugar makers know. If for love, or for sickness, or for any sort of thing, take in allopathic doses and repeat it every spring, till at home or on the street, anyone you meet will be half a mind to bite you, 'cause you look so very sweet. Oh, bubble, bubble, bubble goes the syrup in the pan. Making sweeter music, try to top it if you can. See the golden billows, watch the ebb and flow. Sweeter joys indeed, we sugar makers know. Oh, bubble, bubble, bubble goes the syrup in the pan. Making sweeter music, try to top it if you can. See the golden billows, watch the ebb and flow. Sweeter joys indeed, we sugar makers know.
We'll compare that to another song in a little bit. So, since I can't take you all on the tour of the sugar house, I thought we would continue our historical tour by visiting the Atwood Sugar House as it was in 1875. So the article is the second one in your packet, if I stapled it correctly. But this is an image of the Atwood Sugar House behind me. And although not the same evaporator that they would have had, this is the idea of the evaporator with the segmented pans. Mr. Atwood's evaporator would have been on a brick arch on the bottom. So,
We used to, or I boiled in that sugar house right there.
oh yeah,
On that road, yes.
it's becoming a derelict sugar house now, but
Yeah, it's still standing though.
yes,
Just barely.
yes,
I
yes.
think they're starting to fix it up though.
I saw a ladder out there.
I wonder
Maybe-
which one would be working on it? Bill?
John,
Bill isn't
probably.
gonna spend it.
John, probably.
John?
No, I don't think
No?
it's John, I think it's Billy's sister that owns the.
A Sharon.
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 Sharon. Sharon.
She gave me the
She owns the
image,
house.
the painting to use here. So the sugar bush. Why they call the forest of 1,000 maple trees or more a sugar bush, we do not know, and we don't care. But we very cheerfully accepted an invitation to visit Mr. William Atwood's bush in the afternoon, and only regret that we did not have all of our family with us. They do not sugar off as they used to, and the era of the potash kettle is gradually passing away, although good sugar makers still use them. But what is known as the evaporator is rapidly superseding them. Mr. Atwood has one, manufactured by the Hartford Sorghum Machine Company and for sale by Mr. Little of East Chazy. It is a pan about 12 feet long, divided into numerous compartments, open into each other in a peculiar manner, and placed upon a brick arch of equal length. The sap runs in at one end of this pan and runs out syrup at the other end. Let us be more specific. First, they have a large sugar house, 20 or 30 feet square. The sap is gathered in hogsheads, placed upon a sled, and drawn to this house, where it is pumped into a large vat in one corner, elevated 4 or more feet from the ground. From this, it is conducted by hose into the evaporating pan, and by an ingenious contrivance, the supply is self-adjusting. When there is a hot fire and the sap is evaporating rapidly, the stream from the vat increases, so that the quantity in the evaporator remains uniform. The fire is built in the end of the arch where the sap runs in. The syrup, when drawn off, is put into another smaller pan and sugared off. With good wood, one of these evaporators will make 300 pounds of sugar in a day, perhaps more. We shall long cherish sweet recollections of Mr. Atwood's sugar bush. At this time, it seems like all the society pages were full of something about maple sugar or the maple season, and so I included this piece on the bottom. It says, everybody and his friends are in the sugar bush. Therefore, news is as scarce as clean floors in the Whitehall and Canada Railroad Depot. And I did cut off the bottom, but it talks about there's not even a baby left on doorsteps. So it must be they were all busy in the sugar bush. Let's talk a little bit about maple sugar as a cash crop. Maple was an amazing cash crop for Clinton County. Produced between the harvest in the fall and spring planting, maple sugar could be produced for home use, traded as payment, or sold for cash. A variety of maple sugar molds are pictured here, along with the 1875 statistics showing how Clinton County was producing a huge amount of maple sugar versus a much smaller amount of maple syrup. Note the quantity made in Shazy. And I don't just look at Shazy because I'm originally from West Shazy, but when you look at those numbers, you realize, no pun intended, Shazy was certainly the sweet spot for maple. So I'm going to take a little bit deeper dive into Shazy. It is a little surprise, therefore, that the Wheeler's New Process Evaporator Company was formed in Shazy. The Wheeler New Process Evaporator was patented in 1888 by Ernest Wheeler, and it's pictured here on the postcard behind me. The company was owned by Ernest Wheeler and George Severance, and it made a variety of maple equipment. I love that postcard. It's such a neat image, and I think we're lucky to have that. I've heard of one other person that actually saw the doors for Wheeler Evaporator in the woods, and I said, you didn't ask, the landowner if you can have them? She goes, no, I left them where they were. And that just about kills me every time I see this postcard. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the legend of Shazy, and it ties directly into Vermont and how Vermont became synonymous with maple syrup and not New York. These images are of the Chisholm family from Shazy, and the maple syrup that won first prize in the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 came from the farm of John Chisholm in Shazy. They had an uncle, Henry Hill, who hailed from Isle Lamont, Vermont. He came over to visit the Chisholm family during sugaring season, and he purchased about 10 gallons. He took some of that syrup and he entered it in the Chicago World's Fair. Therefore, it became Henry Hill's maple syrup of Isle Lamont, Vermont. After it secured first prize, then Vermont still holds the standing of #1 in maple syrup. So it should have been New York, and it should have been Shazy, but.
It was New York for quite a while.
Yeah, New York.
Yeah, and then Vermont took over.
Right. Yeah, they've done a lot of advertising and put themselves there, but it's just funny to me that little connection. If they put it as Chisholm family syrup, it would have changed New York advertising.
I'm not saying that, Vermonters didn't take some New York syrup and claim it was Vermont,
My mom's a Vermonter, so I can play both sides of that argument. In fact, in last week's presentation, I didn't even put it in. So I do play the middle of the road with maple syrup. Let's enjoy a few images of maple season. As I said, it was a time when roads were opening up again, people were beginning to travel, and so I have some images of, let's see if I can do this over my shoulder. This is the Hearts Delight Sugar House in Shazy, Hearts Delight gathering in the woods, gathering in West Shazy, and then a sugar house along Spelman Road. I kept finding obscure articles that mentioned maple syrup, and I think this is one of my favorites. I just mentioned roads were opening up again, and this is the proof of spring and roads opening up again. Maple syrup in West Shazy is mentioned in a crime report from 1925. Bootleggers caught in Elizabethtown along Bootleg Trail, listing among the other sure signs of spring, sap starting to run in West Shazy maple trees. So I just thought it was interesting how the two are so synonymous, it just simply goes together. In 1929, Clinton County Maple Producers Association was advertising the active purchase of maple syrup, hard sugar, and soft sugar directly from the producer. Please note that this is the first time I've mentioned maple syrup as the primary and first product to purchase here. This sugar house over my shoulder is that of Ralph Rigor. And although it's missing the cupola, it is still visible along the Rico Road today. The other producers listed having their product for sale would be William A. Atwood, Wilbur Atwood, F.B. Blake, Mrs. Letty Barber, L.J. Dino, B.F. Harvey, B.P. Harvey, F.J. Langfield, C.B. Langfield, Ralph Recor, John Recor, and W.C. Scribner. Let's take a closer look at the Will and Ada Scribner sugar house and sugaring operation, as told by Addie Shields in her book of The Survival of Families in Beacon Town. That's also in your packet, so feel free to read along. Addie's parents worked for the Scribner family. They didn't have any children until they had one by adoption. And so they were often paid in maple syrup or maple sugar, but they joined right in the work of the season. And so this is how she described it. In maple season, we were often paid in syrup and maple sugar. Howard helped gather the sap and stoke the fire to boil the sap in the evaporator down into syrup. Will filled the market wagon with shiny gallon cans of syrup. This would make very light, clear syrup. He tried to take this in early to hit the market for a good price. While he was gone, Howard and Ernest would gather and keep the boiling going. As the sugaring progressed, Agnes and Howard would receive a gallon of syrup, and in between days, when the sap wasn't running, Will would boil up syrup and make soft sugar to fill the 5-gallon soft sugar pails. The sugaring season continued for several weeks. Howard said that when they were boiling sap at night, the engineer on the train could see the billowing steam highlighted by the glow of massive fire in the firebox and blow the whistle as a salute to acknowledge them. Often they would stand with the door open and wave in return. The engineer would blow the whistle again. As I mentioned, it was all about marketing your cash crop. Like he talks about getting the syrup to market early for the better price. Addie also mentioned specifically marketing. Will would hitch his road horse on his market wagon and take syrup into the stores in Plattsburgh as soon as he could in the season for the better price. When the trees started to bud and the syrup was not worth as much, it was put in special drums and sold to tobacco firms to season tobacco. So that gives you a complete view of the season. Here's a few more family photos of people that were stopping to really take time to enjoy the season. According to the history of the town of Chazy, when we look up maple production, it was perhaps one of the most enjoyable of all farm work, coming as it did between logging and spring plowing. Citizens of Altona certainly look forward to maple season as well. In early spring, the big event was making maple syrup and sugar. Young and old gathered in sugar houses when the sap was boiling and made it into syrup and sugar. Again, I listed some of the producers from the 1930s. Frank Neverett, Lawrence Atwood, Ralph Recor, Curly Parker, John Recor, Will Atwood, and of course Hart's Lake Farm. I also included the number of taps each operation has. These images are from the Roy LeGoy farm that would have been what is now Camp Jericho. These are part of the Town of Altona collection. And the colored buckets, I found that in a museum in Ontario. When we visited, they had a complete wall of buckets, and I included that image here because my dad used to say that when you walked in the sugar bush, when he was a kid, it looked like a rainbow. Nobody cared what color the buckets are. When I think of maple buckets on trees, I always think of the galvanized buckets, and often people are painting on those now and using them as artisan pieces. He said it didn't matter the color of the bucket, it was about catching the sap. So, looking back at what other people would have thought about all these buckets hanging around Clinton County. This, again, I think the third page in the packet is April 7th, 1932. In this county, we believe the town of Chazy is the leader in maple sugar production. Of late years, a flourishing county organization known as the Maple Sugar Products Association has given considerable attention to putting forth the merits of Clinton County maple sugar. One would not be likely to notice at any other season, but if he were to drive out to some of those roads between West Chazy and up the road to Scioto, he would see enough buckets hanging from trees to keep a bucket factory busy for some time. It made me think back to Wheelers. I don't think Wheelers was in operation then. But as I said, I find it really fun to talk about the sugaring off parties and the sugar socials. They were, oftentimes, the sugar socials were used by civic organizations or religious organizations as a fundraiser. I included one article here, and I still feel like I'm standing in front of the screen. But the article mentions, bring your friends, come support the organization. There's going to be cards and dancing and sugar on snow or wax on snow. Was a big hit. The sugaring off parties often occurred in the sugar bush itself. There was one mention of going to the sugar bush and they didn't want to let the reader know about all the perils it was to get, how perilous it was to actually get into the sugar bush itself. The other one that I read about mentioned more of like a sugaring picnic. The family went into the Atwood sugar bush, and how wonderful it was to be able to watch the men gather the sap and see the sap dripping in the buckets as they enjoyed their picnic. So, and there's, as close as I could ever come to having a sugar social at Parker's. They let me make sugar on snow. How many people here have had sugar on snow before? Okay. It's one of my favorite things. And if you eat too much, eat some dill pickles, then you can eat more. Try being a little kid with braces trying to get out snow. That was tricky, but I survived. So. Think back for a second to the description by Thomas Jefferson, where maple sugar was the sugar not made by slaves. It was the sugar that could be made by women and children. In 1943, I don't think residents of Clinton County agreed with that. What did we have going on? World War. Yeah, World War II. So people were concerned it was going to be a great season, but they had no way to gather the sap because the men were off fighting. So no longer was it the sugar simply made by women and children. But they were talking about the trees having to run on the ground and how sad that was, especially in being a time where you could make your own sugar. I can't imagine what that would have felt like to have to give that up.
With sugar rations.
Yep. Yeah, and you had a chance to make it, but they didn't have enough manpower. The next slide, the music doesn't come up. It comes up too quick when I click on it, so let me talk about it first. But I promised you a second song. So, comparing to 1858 with Reverend Fisk and the song he wrote about maple syrup is still celebrated, the season is still celebrated today in song, and so I would be remiss if I didn't include Fire in the Sugar House by Banjo Dan and Midnight Plowboys. As historically interested people, if you ever get a chance to look up on the Fire in the Sugar House CD, it has some great historical songs as well. So I enjoyed the whole thing. But listen to the song and you'll see how there's still the same joy of the season, but you can listen to the differences of how the process has changed. based on the music itself.
Billy C and Jenny Bluth were trying to get it done. They were boiling, they were packing, trying to keep up with the run. But things don't often work out just the way we planned. Had some heat and pretty soon sap's boiling in the pan. The wood was hot and black as not, they had cold ones in the snow. The sky was black, a million stars, but on their nightly show, Billy stoked the fire with wood and Jenny drew the sap. When they got tired, he sat him down, she sat upon his lap. Fire in Sugar House, it's really getting hot. Getting sticky in the Sugar House, it's heating up a lot. It's roiling and it's boiling and it's filling up with steam. The fog is sweet and heavy and it's like you're in a dream. There's fire in Sugar House, it's really getting hot. Getting sticky in the Sugar House, it's heating up a lot. Kissing, they were hugging. In that steamy dark, wasn't just the wood inside the arch that began to spark. Jenny took her sweater off. She had 3 more on the sides. They were on that slippery slope, looking forward to the slide. Now, when you're making maple, you've got to be aware. You can burn the pan, start a fire, even singe your hair. But sometimes maple syrup's not the sweetest thing. It's not that flies through blue spring skies like a songbird on the wing. Fire in the Sugar House, it's really getting hot. It's sticky in the Sugar House, it's heating up a lot. It's roiling and it's boiling and it's filling up with steam. The fog is sweet and heavy and it's like you're in a dream. There's fire in the Sugar House, it's really getting hot. It's sticky in the Sugar House, it's heating up a lot. It's really getting hot. It's sticky in the Sugar House. It's heating up a lot. There's fire in the Sugar House. It's really getting hot. There's fire in the Sugar House. It's really getting a lot. There's fire in the Sugar House. It's really up a lot. There's fire in the Sugar House. It's really getting a lot. Getting sticky in the Sugar House. It's heating up a lot.
So now that we're all thinking about the joys of maple season and sugaring off parties, let me take a minute to revisit Will and Ada Scribner and see Addie's perspective as a little girl attending a small sugaring off party with Will and Ada. Will and Ada would invite them over on a Sunday afternoon where Will would sugar off. Ernest would find a snowbank where the snow was clean and bring a wash tub filled with the clean snow into the summer kitchen. He would then fill each of them a pan full of snow and bring it into the kitchen and place it before each of them on the big table. Will would be at the stove where he was tending about 2 quarts of syrup. He would raise the spoon, and when the syrup dropped from the spoon with thread, it was ready. Each of them was given a dish with a spoon. The crystallized syrup would drop just so in the snow. They dropped it in small amounts and railroads and wound it up on their forks. They had wax on snow. If that's not nostalgic. Oh, yeah. Today, maple is still an important part of our culture. The terms may have changed, but the concepts are still the same. Maple sugar production has been replaced by maple syrup production mainly. Active sugar houses, large and small, still dot our landscape. Plastic tubing has replaced many of the metal buckets, but the New York State Maple Weekend is still a time to celebrate maple season with sugar houses that are open to the public. There are seasonal pancake houses and activities where the consumer can still enjoy pure New York maple syrup directly from the local producer in the sugar house. Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions?
That's beautiful. Well, what happens with the, like, you're gonna tap all those trees? Do you leave the tap in or pull it out to let it heal?
You pull it out to let it know.
Okay.
Yep, we're actually, we just finished making, sap at our house. My husband and I have 13,000 taps
Oh.
on Myrtle Hill Road. We sell the sap to my brother at Parker's. And so this week, while the kids are on Easter break, my son and his friend JD had been pulling spouts. So that's its own activity for the next couple of weeks.
And what about all those lines I see when I drive through?
So the
those
lines
bushes?
stay up, you just pull the spout from the tree,
Yeah,
but the lines stay up. If you look at the blue lines and the bigger pipelines, if we had to take those down every year, we wouldn't make syrup. That'd be a lot of taking down and putting up.
do you have to clean them?
Yeah, that's kind of the discretion of the producer, but yeah, you clean them with water, push water through the system. It depends whether you're on vacuum system like we are, or gravity fed, where you just make sure everything runs downhill. But it's a more of a scientific process than people realize.
I have 2 cousins in Vermont, and they have their taps in the low-lying areas. They've already pulled the spouts on those, but higher in the hills, they started yesterday
Right.
pulling the spouts. They got 130,000 to do, one brother, and the other brother's got about 145,000. They got, and I know you people have a ton too.
Yeah, my brother
Your
has
brother, yeah.
100,000-ish.
Yes.
But he's not quite as big as some of the producers in Vermont, but he's big enough. And I think our 13,000 taps at our house is enough. So I used to laugh at my dad. When I was a kid, Dad had 20,000 taps. I said, boy, Dad, I never thought I'd have a sugar bush almost as big as your whole operation when I was a kid.
Your dad and my dad were buddies.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Yeah.
I have a question, I don't know if you know the answer. They kept on referring to William Atwood. Would that have been Homer's father?
So I'm not a great Atwood genealogist. There was William A and William T, and I can never remember which is which.
Okay.
But it would be like Homer's father and grandfather, but I don't
Okay.
remember which order they come in.
Okay.
So that's as close as I can answer that. Yes, Helen?
I found a volunteer to help distribute your treat.
Oh, yes. Well, that's you reminding me to stop talking and start handing out the books.
No, you can keep asking questions.
So we did bring maple candy. That's the closest I can come to the descriptions of maple sugar. But I have some here to pass out and try. I'm certainly not offering a sales pitch, just enjoy. You want them? Yes, you have to deal with the projectile light in your eyes. There you go.
So Kristina, there's a lot of maple sugar producers in this area. I
Yes.
mean, they're like all over, a lot of little ones and bigger ones. So do a lot of them bring their product to Parker Brothers to be processed?
I don't know. I've been out of the family business as far as Michael's office management since Keith was 3, so I'm out of touch. Being that Keith is now 13 and passing out the maple candy. I quit working for Michael, quit trying to keep up with him when Keith was 3. But Michael does have his own taps, and they also do buy sap from other people and process it, usually on halves. But we also turned the dairy barn a number of years ago into refrigerated barrel storage. So like if you make maple syrup, but you don't have a facility to deal with the gallons and smaller quantities for the consumer, they can do, you can come to Michael, you sell your barrels for a pound price, and he actually has the capacity to store it. until it's wanted by a larger buyer in New Hampshire. And he actually has, that's why if you happen to drive by the farm, there's tons of tractor trailers. We use them during the sugaring season to haul the sap, but he also used them to move barrels throughout the year.
I have a question about the heat source for the evaporators. You mentioned, obviously, there's wood, fresh wood.
Yeah.
Aged wood.
Yeah.
But, what's the other source? Oil, gas?
Steam,
I'm good. Yes,
But what's the steam generated from?
oil.
Oil, okay.
yeah.
And is there a difference from evaporating from wood versus steam?
Well, you have to have wood from here to Montreal if you,
For the size you guys are talking, okay.
Yeah.
But
would it
we
make a
seem to
difference in
have
the taste?
several smaller
some people say,
farmers,
you know,
too.
that they like the wood flavored, when
They
it's,
can really tell a difference?
well,
Some
I,
I've heard that too.
I don't know, wives' tale, I think,
Some
but
people-
I don't know.
I've heard people say, oh, the Amish syrup tastes more like the syrup from my youth.
Sure.
So that's my example. There is, natural gas. There, any way you can heat your home, you can find an evaporator to do that.
Okay.
They even have electric boilers now.
Electric, wow.
Yeah.
And that reverse
Osmosis.
osmosis is a big help, isn't it?
Yes.
Huge.
Mhm.
Yes, it wouldn't boil without it.
No?
My father was the first one to have it, here in New York,
No
the
kidding.
reverse osmosis, yeah, machines. They look a lot different than they do today.
Yeah.
My father's were verticals and now they're horizontal.
Mm.
They're big filters is what they are, reverse osmosis. They
It's the same.
Big filters.
It's the same concept as desalination of
Yeah.
salt water for me. So, my brother Mark Rowe built one of the first ones with liter evaporator,
Mhm.
and they must purchase their RO machines at about the same time. And I remember Dad.
They got it, my dad got it from Leader, yes.
Yep. And my brother Mark worked for Leader at the time. And I was small enough that Dad let us put our hands in the concrete when he built the room for the RO machines. But I remember we took water and food coloring, ran it through the RO machine, just, I guess, to see if it worked. And it separated out the water from the color.
Yeah.
Wow. But it's the same idea. And now it's just more, it's the same concept, just more mechanized. My brother can control his RO machine from his phone. He can call my house and say, Chrissy, is there a problem at your pump house? I go, I don't know, I'm in the house. He goes, well, my alarm just went off, so go check. Because, you just lost power or something. But it's all computers and,
Yes.
they can see the vacuum pressure in the woods and they can know what line it was. Like when I was a kid, if you wanted to have somebody walk a sugar bush to make sure the vacuum was high and the production was gonna be good, you'd take 10 men and just start walking. And now you can pinpoint on the computer, like, oh, go to line 1A in this bush and bring that vacuum up. And so,
Don't waste your time on the ones that are working fine, you look right on the screen on the wall.
yeah,
Just go to where the problem is now,
I know,
with
So
the
if a-
cameras. and-
If a squirrel bit through a line, you'd know right where to go.
yeah, pretty much.
You give you a dot on it, it'll tell you where it was, where the problem is.
And as with anything else, green is good,
Yeah.
yellow is good, red is go get there.
Big trouble.
So it makes it, pretty easy, and they have sensors that tell you when your tanks are getting full, so you don't have to calculate that even. But it's as mechanized as you want to be, or as simple as you want it to be. It all depends if you have 2 trees in your yard, and you're boiling it for the experience of it with your family, or you're mass producing it like we are.
Yeah.
Sometimes I miss that backyard boiling that I used to do.
Chrissy,
Yeah,
how old was Michael when you started?
I don't know, 5 or 10.
And you were the person that went around,
I was the taster.
you were the taster?
Don't get that job. Just go out, Chrissy, taste it. Chrissy had no tongue left.
She had a scooter, she went around with a.
Little red wagon tied to the back of my scooter to gather our sap.
There you go.
What did you say? As we boiled it on a pan with
I
cinder
don't know.
blocks.
What did I say?
You said put it near the pond, so if you catch on fire, you can roll in. You rolled up, so I thought I'd finish the story.
Okay.
Yeah, we keep her quiet for the
They were farm kids, they were tough.
We never did though, catch on fire, so.
No.
One year we made enough to flavor our ice cream with. We thought that was really cool. We made enough to make maple ice
It
cream.
was black.
Yeah.
So, there's different shades of maple syrup, is that just you cook it longer to get darker? Or
It
evaporate
just
longer?
happens as the season progresses. Usually the beginning of the season you end up with the golden, the lighter colors, and then toward the end of the season it's gonna naturally turn darker. It's up to the tree more than the process itself.
Oh, okay.
So.
Which is the better seller?
When I was a kid, I would have said the golden or the amber would have been what we considered gourmet. But working the counter, I have seen that totally switch to more people liking the darker color, darker flavor.
It's robust, it's,
Yes.
you taste the maple more.
Yes. So,
So do you get much damage like from deer and stuff taking the lines out?
deer not so much. They'll go underneath. They'll jump it. This year we saw moose tracks in our sugar bush. I don't really like that so much because they'll walk through it.
Yeah.
Mostly rodent damage. Squirrels and chipmunks and stuff are the enemy. So I feel weird. My husband's in the back row, and I have Jimmy. Both work more in the woods than I do. So, like all the fun. So I am the researcher. I'm the retail. I'm the come see me for your school tours. I know more about the woods from the CDL catalog than I do from going in the sugar bush itself.
You gonna write another book?
I would like to do my autobiography at some point,
Oh.
when life slows down. So somebody joked with me one day and said, that would be like modern farmer boy with a handicap twist. I said, yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Christine.
Yes,
We have your
Really
book.
lovely.
There's more candy. You all should eat some more so I don't have to.
Christina, we have your book for sale in our shop.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Good little plug,